AV Shop Talk, Episode 26.
Podcasting from Boston, Massachusetts and Denver, Colorado, this is AV Shop Talk, covering the latest trends and emerging technologies and systems integration. This is where the AV pros come to talk shop. With your hosts, Nate Schneider and Jason Griffin.
Welcome to the AV Shop Talk podcast. Thank you so much for joining us in episode 26. We've got some big news in this episode, but first I'd like to welcome back to the show Jason. Thanks for joining us tonight. How you doing, man?
Yeah, it's been a while, Nate. Good to be back.
Yeah, how's the wife and kids? How's Denver, the new job?
Great. Yeah, everything is good. We got a ton of stuff going on and just really enjoying, we've been here in Denver now for, 6, 7, 8 months, something like that. So time is flying. But we're really feel like we're getting settled in and really enjoying the city and just kind of getting our feet under us here. So
yeah,
everything is good.
Great. I was poking around on LinkedIn and I came across your profile today and I saw like 7 months or something like that. And I was like, wow, it's already been 7 months you're in Denver.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yep. Never ceases to amaze me.
I know. And of course, your Broncos won, so I have to give you a little nod there.
Yes.
Congratulations. Nice to have a Super Bowl winning team there.
Yeah, it's a fun time to be in Denver for that reason, indeed. And I've been cheering for the Denver Broncos now for about 16 years or so. I moved up here originally from Arizona back in 2000 and kind of caught Broncos fever back then and have never looked back. And so it's been a long 16 years with a few rough seasons in there and a couple of real crushing postseason defeats. And so we're over the moon to have a Super Bowl champion here in Denver. It definitely was a fun game to watch.
Yeah, definitely nice to see Manning get one before his career is over. I don't know how long he's going to be in the league for. Did he make any announcements?
He has not. It's still up in the air, but I suspect we've seen the last of Peyton Manning.
Yeah. Well, enough football talk. We got to get to the shop talk. But before we get too far, I understand you've got some big news you'd like to share with the listeners to the AV Shop Talk podcast.
We do. Yeah, we do. We're very excited. As listeners to the show probably know, I have a daughter who is, as we're sitting here recording, about 15 months old. And my wife and I are very excited to say that we are expecting our second in August. So we're super excited for that. And we have actually already found out that it's going to be a boy. And so we'll have one of each, which we're extra excited about and all good stuff. Like I said, everything is great here.
That's awesome. One of each is great. You get both experiences, having a little girl, having a little boy. You can already picture fishing trips and all that. I know you're into fishing and stuff, so that's gonna be,
it's one of those things. When she was pregnant with our first, I have to admit, was very, very hung up on wanting it to be a boy. And then we ended up having our daughter, and I just couldn't imagine it being any different. It's just so awesome. Love being a father. She's just my everything, and it's been really awesome. But we found out we were pregnant again, and we were both kind of hoping that it would be a boy. Obviously, we'd be happy either way, and we just feel blessed for everything. But we were both very excited to find out that it was a boy.
Well, congratulations! We'll be following along on Twitter for those baby pics when time
definitely
comes. So definitely need to share out some of those with the hashtag AVKid or something like whatever. There's some hashtag.
We'll come up with something.
Yeah. All right, cool. So with that, you've got some other big news, which is also this is an appropriate time to share that. So we should dive into that.
Yeah. We wanted to sit down and kind of record the show together and let the audience know. Anyone who's been kind of paying attention, I've been a little bit off the radar here for the last few months, and we've been talking, and I've just made the decision actually to step away from doing AV Shop Talk indefinitely and kind of let you take the reins solo, and it was definitely a tough decision, and it's a project that we've really put a lot of work into, and I've been really honored to be a part of it, and to work with you has been great, and all around just a fun time and really a great educational experience. But there's a number of reasons we can kind of get into here for a few minutes as to why I've decided to step away. But we wanted to sit down and record an episode together and kind of explain that to the audience and let them know what's going on.
Yeah, so in the future, you won't hear Jason's voice as much. I won't say you'll never hear it, because we're still planning to collaborate, when we can, especially about home tech stuff. But I will be carrying the torch, so you guys can expect that AV Shop Talk will continue to publish new episodes on the first of the month moving forward. But yeah, it's definitely going to be different. And we're not going to have Jason's perspective as much from the Resi world, but I think the show will still manage to get by. But it's been great collaborating with you for like the last 2 years, and it is a lot of work. I mean, doing a podcast, actually setting up the RSS feeds, the WordPress stuff, the social media, everything that comes along with doing a podcast. It's a lot of fun. It's great, but it's a lot of work. So totally understandable. You got another kid on the way. There's you got your hands full right now. So I'm happy for you. I'm excited for you. You got new opportunities, and
thank you.
Just the way things go down.
Yeah, and we've been kind of joking and hope we can still be friends, Nate. It kind of does feel like a breakup, right? And I don't want it to, but you get attached to these projects, and I definitely had a lot invested in doing this, and it was really has been a great experience. Like you alluded to, doing a podcast is a ton of work, and I think we both came into it eyes wide open and knew that to a certain level, but I don't think you can ever fully prepare for these sort of projects if you've never done one before, and you kind of have to dive in and just see what happens and figure it out as you go. And it's a constant learning experience. And I'm not sure how, what portion of our listeners know or are aware, but I do a second podcast. It's actually a weekly show called Home Tech, and that's at hometech.fm. And that is, as the name implies, very focused on residential home technology. And we have interviews and try to cover the latest in home technology news. And that really is such an evolving landscape and so rapidly changing that it becomes very difficult to keep up with it. And so just ultimately what it came down to was just got to be a little bit too much to try to do both podcasts in addition to just sort of preparing here on the home front for our second baby and just kind of doing all the math and trying to figure out how to make it all balance. It just really came down to something had to give. Also, one of the other things that you and I have talked about that's been interesting for me in my journey as an AV professional is when I moved here to Denver, I transitioned out of what I had been doing in Los Angeles was a senior project management type of role. And what I've transitioned to here in Denver is a business development role and sales. And a lot of what I do has to do with relationship building. And a big part of relationship building is being out at networking events, which of course take place during the evening. So particularly leading up to the holidays and coming up this spring, the networking event scene gets very busy. And so that takes at least one night of my week, sometimes two on the busier seasons. And so trying to do all the networking events and do 2 podcasts and be a husband and father, very difficult, just a lot to try and balance.
It reminds me of when I go to a Chinese buffet and I always take more than I can eat. It's like everything looks so good. I know that's really tongue in cheek, probably inappropriate comparison, but no, seriously though, you have to
I'd say it's appropriate
for a big chubby guy like me. I mean, it's a perfect analogy, but you do have to sit down and figure out how many hours are in the week, what can I do, and what's important, and obviously family is important, and
absolutely,
family's got to come first before your side projects, and this is something I always talk about with my wife too. It's like, okay, when am I going to carve out time? Okay, I'll do this, and making sure we get time with the kids, and that's what really matters.
Changes everything, doesn't it?
Oh, it totally does. It totally does.
So just wanted to kind of make 2016 a year where I got super focused on the home technology side. A lot of what we talk about on AV Shop Talk was it would cross that divide, and we really have always tried to find topics that were relevant to both sides of the industry, commercial and residential, and I think there's so much overlap that can definitely be done. But really, just wanted to get focused in on the home technology stuff, and that's where I live and breathe. That's what I do every day, and so it's definitely a natural synergy for me to really dig into that and spend as much time as I can building my network and getting educated and interviewing people and learning as much as I can about home technology. And that's really been one of my favorite parts about podcasting in general with both shows is the amount of stuff that you learn. And that was one thing I have to say that coming into the project, I think I really underestimated is how much I would take away from it in terms of just the educational aspect of it. And it's hard to learn a topic any better than if you're preparing for an interview and you're thinking about the topic in a way that you're trying to teach your audience and let the audience come away with something. I feel like that really forced me to think very hard about the topics that we were covering. And that was one of my favorite things about doing the deep dives that we did on AV Shop Talk is really getting into those technical issues and the design challenges and things that integrators are always facing, and just digging in and trying to wrap my brain around it and make it easy to digest for somebody listening to a podcast at the gym or on their drive to work.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going back to episodes 2 and 3 when we did interviews with the HD-based T Alliance and the Avenue Alliance. I remember just pouring through the websites and the information, just trying to make sure I understood the technology I was about to I don't think I've ever prepared more except for those first 2 interviews, because we had never, I don't even think we even had a name at that point. We're just like, hey, I wonder if people do interviews with us. And we just hey, you want to do an interview? It'll be on a blog or something. People were like, yeah, sure. People were really nice about it.
Yeah, the behind the scenes. Yeah.
And we're like, okay, we got to come up with a name. And I think you came up with AV Shop Talk, which I was like, yes, that's perfect. We'll go with it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's funny, some of that behind the scenes stuff that you just don't think about. And I think now when I listen to podcasts of other people that maybe I've been listening to for years and years, really gives you a different perspective about the amount of preparation and stuff that goes into getting the show up and off the ground. And then once that's done, just maintain and put out an episode at a regular interval and get the show notes done and try to spread the word. It's a big project. It's a big undertaking and definitely something that you have to be passionate about in order to do it.
Yeah. And I still got the fire burning. I'm still passionate about it, so I'm good for another couple years at least. We'll see what happens after that, but I plan to stick with it.
Yeah, and that's great. I'm glad. I've told you off air and want to say it on air as well that I'm very happy that you're going to continue to carry the show on, and that was one of the things that actually was giving me a fair amount of angst when I was thinking about trying to make this decision and letting you know. And I was really hoping that it wouldn't be the end of AV Shop Talk. I think the concept of the show is great. I think that the industry needs it. I think that there are a lot of shows out there that do the news very well and cover the latest happenings, and to a certain extent they'll get somewhat technical. But I think what we always try to do with AV Shop Talk, and what I'll be interested to see if you continue to go down that road, is take those deep dives and really be an educational resource to people listening, and try to really focus on some of the key topics and challenges facing the industry. And excited to see where you take the show, Nate.
Yeah, I'm up for the challenge, so I'm excited to catch the ball and run with it. So it'll be good. But with that, I just wanted to mention also home tech. I know you've been really digging in with home tech, and anybody who's not familiar, you can check out hometech.fm to see what Jason's been up to. The last 2 episodes that I really, really enjoyed, like my last 2 favorites, were episode 91 and episode 98. So if you check out those 2, episode 91 was the technology.fm holiday fireside chat, which I thought was excellent.
That was a fun one.
I mean, yeah. I got to tell you, I'm not just saying this just because, but hometech.fm is in my regular listening queue. It's one of the shows that I don't miss.
Really appreciate that.
There's a few shows that I need to listen to every single episode, and Home Tech is definitely one of them. So you guys are doing great things over there.
Awesome.
So look forward to keeping up with the Resi world and in the home tech world.
Yeah, it's an exciting landscape. And the episode you mentioned in particular, episode 91, was a really a fun one to do. As the name implies, obviously we did it leading up to the holidays. And had a couple of colleagues on the show. HomeTech.fm is featured on a website called Technology.fm, and that is a website that a gentleman by the name of Michael Wolf hosts. And if you're not familiar with Mike Wolf, he's an analyst and writes for Forbes and is very, very educated in the smart home. He definitely comes at it from a different perspective. Like I said, he is an analyst, so I think his core audience is more executives and startups in the space and things of that nature, as opposed to maybe integrators and home technology pros like me. But he puts out a great show. We had him come on and join us, and also a gentleman by the name of Richard Gunther, who hosts another good home technology show called Home On, and he is comes at it from really the hardcore kind of DIY enthusiast end of the market. He's a kind of a hardcore Insteon guy and really likes tweaking, and it's a hobby for him. And so we have kind of this nice trifecta where you've got myself and Seth, and we're the CEDIA guys and the home technology pros, and you've got Mike Wolf, who's the analyst, and Richard Gunther, who's really the hardcore enthusiast. And all three of those shows have different perspectives, and often we're covering the same stories, but we just come at it from different angles, and I think that really makes for an interesting dynamic. And we thought it would be fun leading up to the holidays to get both of those guys to come on and just kind of look back at the year and share what we thought were some of the big stories. And I would encourage people to go back and listen to that, even though we're after the holidays, obviously still very much relevant, and very glad that you enjoyed the show.
Yeah, I thought it was a great recap, and just like you said, each person brings their own perspective, and a good round table to kind of hear everybody's take. And of course, you've got Seth over there, who always manages to mention the egg minder somehow, which is probably one of the most hilarious products I've heard to come out of the home tech world.
Yeah, I think he told me, I think offline, I can't remember, we recorded an episode last night, and I can't remember if he said it on air or if we were just chatting, but he's having some problems with the egg minder, and so we'll have to stay tuned for that, the sagas of Seth's egg minder.
Oh, is it HDCP 2.2 compliant? Maybe that's the problem.
Yeah, right, exactly. We have a lot of fun with that, and just try to, doing a weekly show is definitely an opportunity to kind of get into some of that smaller talk, and we try to have a little bit of fun and keep it light from time to time, and really enjoy working with Seth. It's been a great project, and one that's been going for about the same amount of time as AV Shop Talk. They really kind of started up around the same time, and so we're actually...
So you've been cheating on me from the beginning. I knew it. I knew it.
Busted. Yeah.
Okay.
But
No
yeah,
hard
we're coming up on episode 100. Actually, the show we recorded last night was episode 99, and we're both just kind of in disbelief about that, and how we've actually gotten to 100 episodes, and it just feels like time again flies, and we're just excited to continue plugging away at that show and see where it goes.
That's great, and I understand you started blogging over there too, and I think was this your first post, and it started making all these waves, or was it your very first post? The one about Crestron?
It was not my first, but we've done very little with the blog over at Home Tech, and very little writing in general, and it is one thing that I'm hoping to do more of this year and put a little bit of focus on that. I really do enjoy writing. I've over the last about year and a half or so, I've done a number of articles for Electronic House, and that's been a lot of fun to work. I work with Lisa Montgomery over there at Electronic House and have really enjoyed working there. But as far as writing, that's really been kind of the bulk of what I've been doing for writing. And this year I really would like to get back into doing a bit more of writing for myself, and not necessarily being kind of fed stories, but being able to choose what I want to write about and what I want to say about it. And I've decided to make Home Tech the platform for that, and I'm not going to hold myself to any specific schedule when it comes to kind of doing the long form blog posts. We'll see how often I can get to those. I have committed to the audience to do a weekly newsletter, which if you're interested in learning more about home tech, or you're just into home technology, you can sign up for that newsletter at hometech.fm, and there's just a little sign up form on the right hand side of the website. And so I have been trying to ramp that up and be really consistent about doing that every single week, and I have enjoyed doing that. But as far as kind of the long form blog posts, I hope to maybe get one or two of those out every month.
Yeah, well, the one that I was thinking about was titled Crestron Left CEDIA, Get Over It. And that was, I understand that made some waves and got some pretty good traffic.
It did. Yeah, it did. It got picked up kind of on Twitter. I really... the story about Crestron leaving CEDIA, I think we're going to chat a little about it. We do want to talk a little bit of shop and not make this entire episode just about what's going on in the future, but we want to dive into at least one or two stories, and that is a big one, right? I mean, it definitely, when that news broke on CE Pro, it had the whole industry kind of talking and speculating about, well, what does this mean for Crestron and what does this mean for CEDIA? And I wanted to sit down and really had some strong opinions on it, and wanted to make sure I got those out in kind of a timely manner when it was still a relevant topic, and tried to get that thing pushed out the week that the story broke. And Crestron did pick it up and tweeted it, and a number of other people were sharing it. And for us, got quite a bit of traffic. In the grand scheme of things, we're still a pretty small outfit, and so our numbers really aren't the driving force. We just like being connected with our audience and sharing our message, and so we're really not too consumed with the numbers on the blog in particular. But yeah, it is great. When you put a lot of work into writing something, you obviously want people to read it. And I had a fun time writing that article, and I thought it came out and conveyed the message that I was trying to convey, which we can get into, and hope to be doing more of those throughout the year.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a big deal, right? I mean, that was my first impression of Crestron not attending CEDIA. That's not exactly small news, right?
Yeah, I think in the short term it's obvious that it's very big news, and trying to dismiss it and say that it's not would be foolish, because it is. It's a huge story. Crestron has been a front and center exhibitor at CEDIA for years and years and years, and their booth is always a mainstay at the show, and it's definitely one that, even if you're not a big Crestron guy, you look forward to going to Crestron's booth to see what they have going on, because it just is it's a spectacle, and it's a huge display that they put up, and really have always enjoyed going to see what they have showing at CEDIA. So for them to just apparently out of the blue decide that 2016 would be the year they would stop going to CEDIA is obviously a big story. The key takeaway of what I wrote about it and what I firmly believe to be true is that I think for the long-term trajectory of both Crestron and CEDIA, it doesn't change anything. And really what this does represent is kind of a growing divergence in the industry. It's something that we talk about on Home Tech all the time, is this idea of, is CEDIA about luxury custom install, or is CEDIA about home technology? And I fall on the latter side of that. I think there's a lot of overlap happening in home technology. There's a lot of DIY products coming into the space. We're seeing more and more of that on the show floor at CEDIA, and I welcome it with open arms. I think that as a home technology professional, it's my job to be paying attention to this stuff, figuring out what's good about it, what's not good about it, what kind of value I can deliver on top of that. And I see no reason why those vendors shouldn't be welcome at CEDIA. And Crestron's argument, at least vaguely, they haven't come out and issued a formal statement about leaving. There has been some videos and some interviews circulating around, and generally the theme or the message that we're hearing from them is that they chose to leave because they didn't feel like CEDIA was doing enough to promote the luxury channel.
Well, that's an interesting distinction. I guess being a commercial guy, I haven't really thought about it a whole lot, but yeah, I mean, you've got high end or luxury integration happening in the resi world, but then you've got this whole like do-it-yourself emerging, just general, I guess I'd call it general home tech type of like gadgets and Internet of Things, connected devices that can do various things. And I guess if CEDIA is kind of moving more towards the general home tech world, I guess that's not necessarily where Crestron's business is. They don't. It kind of, looking at it from that perspective, I can see why the dollars and cents don't necessarily add up to to what Crestron is thinking, and it seems like it makes sense, but I don't know if that's the way CEDIA should. I think that's the bigger question, is like, should CEDIA be moving more towards the general home tech stuff, or should it be focusing more on the high end luxury? I mean, obviously, when you look at the market, there's a lot more companies cropping up in the home tech world. Seems like there's a lot more consumer interest in these home tech gadgets versus, the amount of people in this economy that isn't doing very well. How many people are, working their way up and able to afford a really high-end luxury system? So I think a lot of this is all tied back to economics and just kind of where the global economy is. But I don't know.
Yeah. I think that definitely comes into play, and it's certainly something to consider. I think that it's at least equal parts, though. How am I trying to say this? Not so much driven by the economy. It's equal parts driven by the advances in technology that are happening in the consumer lower cost products. So Nest is an obvious example that even some of my most well-to-do clients that are shopping for very high-end technology in their homes and are willing to spend the money to put in very comprehensive systems that do the things that they want it to do, they're still looking at a product like Nest and saying, well, I can spend this much and get a Nest, or I can go spend, $500 or $600 and get the Savant thermostat or whatever it is. And there are reasons why you would go with the Savant thermostat over the Nest. And as home technology professionals and integrators, we all know intuitively what those reasons are, and it's really about the integration, and you could argue about the reliability and the system architecture and on and on and on. And there's a number of reasons why. My point is that it's our job as home technology professionals to stay educated on that. And Nest is perhaps not the best example because everybody knows about it. It's the sleepers and all these little products that are popping up that fewer of us home technology professionals are able to pay attention to just because there's so many of them. And I just think that for CEDIA to ignore those technologies and for CEDIA to ignore what's happening at the lower end of the market, it would be akin to me ignoring it. And for me to ignore it would be a threat to my livelihood. I can't afford to ignore it because it is the reality. It's what's happening in the market. It's real. It's there. Consumers want it. I have to sell against it. So I need to be educated about it. And to me, that's the number one job of CEDIA, is to be a resource for fellow professionals like me. And so I think for them to ignore what's happening at the lower end of the market, it just doesn't work. They have to pay attention.
Yeah. So there's definitely that's a really interesting example about Nest too, and just how that is kind of an outlier, and that is one product that like is so easily identifiable. Like everybody kind of gravitates towards that one thing. But like you said, there's a whole bunch of other little startup companies that are making gadgets and all kinds of remotes. That's the other thing about starting a podcast that talks about this stuff, is you get all these little startup companies following you and then unfollowing you and following you and trying to get your attention. And it's like, I'm just looking. Is funny. Like I'm looking through, I see a handful of these like remotes that I've never heard of. I'm like, oh, those look pretty cool. I wonder if they'll catch on. Who knows what the next big Nest is going to be or whatever. But yeah, I guess that's why we need people like you to stay on top of this stuff and keep us all
we try.
Up to date.
Yeah, we definitely try. I mean, it's a big theme on our show, is covering that convergence and trying to dissect it and figure out what's important and what's not. I think, moving beyond the point of does CEDIA need to pay attention to that, I think clearly, to me, the answer is yes. The other question, as posed by, Crestron's reasoning, is that, well, is CEDIA doing enough simultaneously? I don't feel like they're mutually exclusive. So I can sit here and say, well, I think CEDIA has to pay attention to what's happening at the low end of the market. And I guess you and I can still have a debate about, okay, yes, we've agreed that they should pay attention to that. Are they doing enough to also promote luxury? And I think that is an aspect of the argument that has kind of gotten lost in the noise a little bit, is that I don't think CEDIA has to pick one or the other. And frankly, I think that CEDIA does plenty to promote luxury. I mean, have you ever walked around the CEDIA show floor? It's insane, some of the stuff they've got showing there. And we're talking about super high-end speakers and theater seating and $150,000 projectors. And I mean, if that's not luxury, I don't know what is. And so I think that to try and say CEDIA can't do both is a bit of a false argument, and I just don't think it holds water. I think this really more has to do with Crestron, just looking at it like you were saying at the outset from kind of a dollars and cents perspective, and saying, okay, Crestron, 80% of their business is commercial. And so 20% is the number that I've heard thrown around that accounts for what their residential business is. And so for them, 20% is it's still a significant number. I don't believe, as some people do, that they're abandoning residential. I think some people have read a little bit too far into this story. But I do think that from a dollars and cents perspective, maybe Crestron has simply made the decision that the money that they were spending at CEDIA, which had to be a very significant amount, could be better allocated at maybe doing a dealer conference and getting all their dealers together at a resort. And ultimately, that may add more to their bottom line than going to show at CEDIA. And I think really it comes down to the economics of does it make sense for them to continue showing at CEDIA? And I do think there's a divergence. We heard very clear messaging from Crestron at CEDIA this year that they want to be perceived as the luxury brand, and they seems very clear to me that they're not interested in going down market the way companies like Savant and to a certain extent Control 4 are. And I think it's an interesting strategy, and it makes sense for them because they can afford to do it because they have 80% of their eggs in the commercial basket. And so they can kind of take what they want, cream of the crop in the residential space, the really big, large projects, and kind of leave everyone else to fight over what's left.
Now, okay, so this is interesting. So Crestron's, stepping back from CEDIA this year. What about AMX? Where do they stand in terms of the high-end luxury systems? Are they? I mean, I've not been to CEDIA. I'm not a CEDIA guy, not a residential guy. I mean, in the commercial world, you always see AMX, you always see Crestron. Those are kind of like the go-to things. I mean, what's your sense on AMX's positioning right now in the high-end residential?
They're all but non-existent, frankly. We just don't see them in residential, and actually, it's great that you brought that up because a number of people have pointed to that as evidence and saying, well, Crestron's going to disappear from the residential channel. Look at what happened to AMX. They stopped coming to CEDIA, and now when was the last time you saw them in a residential project? Coincidentally, I just last week got called in to look at a very large, outdated AMX system where there was some water damage in the house, a result of a leak, and now the system needs to be replaced. And it was honestly the first time I've seen AMX in a home since probably 2005. I worked on a couple projects that had it. And it's very, very uncommon, I would say. Now, there may be geographical parts of the country where that's not so much the case, and maybe some of the high-end markets, I don't know, on the East Coast, maybe Miami, maybe it's different there. But I can tell you in the areas that I've worked, Los Angeles in particular, and in Colorado, we just don't see it. We haven't seen AMX in residential for a while, and it's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up because, again, a lot of people have been pointing to that as an example of what they think is going to happen to Crestron as a result of this story.
Huh? That's interesting because I'm glad you mentioned that because not being in the residential world, I really didn't have a good grasp on that. So I know it's. From my experience and where I've worked, I definitely have not seen anywhere near the amount of AMX control processors installed into compared to Crestron. It seems like it would be like 80-20 or 90-10 almost favor of Crestron. From my personal experience with 9 years in commercial, so I haven't seen a lot of AMX in the commercial world either. But the resi world, I really was not aware of. I assumed they were more popular in the residential world. So that's a little bit eye opening.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't think about that, and that it's kind of, I would say, more common knowledge in the residential space that AMX is kind of out of the game. So it's interesting interesting having those different perspectives.
Yeah, well, speaking of AMX, they made the news. When we gotta touch on this story because especially when a story like this blows up so much, the AMX backdoor issue, the security issue. Jason, are you familiar with this one? Have you?
Yeah, yep. I saw this story and very much a story that would resonated with me generally, just being an integrator, but definitely a story that's very relevant on the commercial, I would say, and governmental sides. We're always thinking about security in the home, but when you start doing installations in big governmental buildings and things of that nature, it becomes kind of a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah. So this story was, so the take on it that I really enjoyed. This was not. Leonard Susskind had a really good take over on the Rave Pubs website. called That AMX Backdoor. And I think Leonard's a really good writer. I like reading his
He's
work.
great.
He's got some good points here. And just skimming through his article, it looks like Ars Technica reported this issue, or they broke the story, and it was an installation in the White House. I mean, they had a picture of an AMX control panel in the White House. And the whole deal behind this was that there's a backdoor here with a security flaw, that could potentially be exploited. And I thought it's something we should at least mention in this episode, since it did get a lot of coverage.
Yeah, and I think Leonard's article was great. I agree with you. He's a great writer. I really enjoy reading what he does. Every time I see an article of his come across, I definitely make sure to read it or flag it to read later, and this one was no exception to that. The story was really about, like you said, this backdoor, and my understanding of it is that it was a backdoor that was put on the system as a way of potentially doing remote service and management. And my understanding of it, if I'm recalling it correctly, was that it had been detected in some way or another and pointed out to AMX, and they'd been given an opportunity to fix it and hadn't, and then basically this story blew up. And I think it's kind of frustrating for integrators that we work in this industry that's so under the radar, and so many people have never even heard of what it is that we do. And then we finally get some coverage on a big outlet like Ars Technica, and it's a story about a big security flaw in a very important installation. And that was sort of the gist, I think, of Leonard's article, was really, hey, we're sitting at the adult table now, is kind of the term that he used as an AV industry, and that we really need to make sure that we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's in terms of security, and thinking very critically about the environments that we're now being asked to work in, and what are the implications for our security and best practices.
Yeah, I mean, and not to go off too much on a tangent, but it's like when everything works fine and everything's designed well, that's just what's expected. You don't get like accolades or praise for, doing everything right. But it's when there's that one little thing that could potentially be exploited and be a security flaw, like that gets on the radar. It reminds me of what just happened at the Grammys with Adele. It's like the poor live sound guy that's doing the broadcast mix, is who knows where he is, in a back room somewhere. And the microphone falls, the piano mic falls down onto the piano strings, and there's just this awful sound, and everybody's just cringing, and it's like, oh geez, the AV guy screwed up again. It's like it doesn't matter if it's security or if it's somebody doing live sound or whatever, but it's only when there's a problem. That's, like you said, unfortunately, that seems like the only time we get noticed is when something goes bad, which is unfortunate, but.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I think that's probably the case for a lot of different industries. People pay service-based industries to come in and solve problems and hopefully prevent problems from even happening in the first place. And when we deliver on that and we're able to execute on it, then the phone doesn't ring to give us pats on the back, right? It's only when things are breaking or not working, or you get these big, once in a while you get these big stories that really cause a splash, and it's unfortunate, but it's just the nature of working in a service business. And I think in a certain sense we're not unique from a lot of other businesses, but it is kind of frustrating, I think, for integrators, and that was the gist I got from Leonard, is like, hey, what can we learn from this, and how can we get better as an industry as a result of this story?
Yeah, and I think we have to take security more seriously, and that's just the world we live in now, where all these devices are connected. We've got to take it more seriously, and I feel like we've got a lot of room to grow, I think, in that area. I personally do. I think I have a lot to learn still about networking security and best practices. And last year at Infocom, I was out there, attending IT security classes with Paul Zealy, and the year before that I did like one of those Super Tuesday classes with Paul, and he knows his stuff. He's got the pedigree, if you will, coming from a background in government work and in the involved in IT and pro AV, so he's the right guy to teach those types of classes. But I think a lot of that stuff is to somebody who's come up in the industry doing XLRs and BNCs, it's kind of like that's another whole ball of wax to wrap your head around,
Oh yeah, definitely. We have to agree with you there.
But that's what we've got to do, though. We've got to embrace it and realize where the industry is going, and if we want to have jobs in the future, we gotta up our game.
Yep, absolutely.
Great. All right. Well, I think we're coming close to the end of our time here. So, anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrap things up, Jason?
No, I think that's it. I just will take one last opportunity again to thank you, Nate. I've really enjoyed working with you on the podcast and truly do look forward to seeing what you're able to do with the show moving forward. And like we've talked about off air, I want to mention it one more time on air, is that we hope to continue collaborating and won't be disappearing from AV Shop Talk completely. Hope to appear as a guest maybe a couple times a year and give you some updates on what's going on in the world of home technology. And we'd definitely like to explore opportunities maybe to get you on to home tech at times as well. So hopefully we can do that. And I've really enjoyed working on the show and just want to thank the whole audience, everybody who's tuned in, everybody who's ever joined us for an interview or helped us coordinate an interview or even sent us a tweet or an email. Really, that stuff means a lot. And the podcast is a labor of love doing these shows, and really any feedback is always encouraging. So just want to thank everybody for tuning in over these last couple of years, and definitely look forward to staying connected with everybody on Twitter and in the other social media outlets.
All right, Jason, it's been a pleasure working with you. I look forward to continued collaboration and seeing what forms that takes. So I think the Home Tech Minute might sound appropriate, or something along those lines, where we'll have you pop on every once in a while and just give us a heads up. But one of the things I really care about is growing community and networking, and I think a podcast dedicated to pro AV and systems integration really can help make the world seem a little bit smaller. So hopefully all you listeners out there are taking advantage of that and hearing people's Twitter handles and following them and connecting and looking people up on LinkedIn. So that's what it's all about. So definitely look forward to continued collaboration.
All right. Sounds good, Nate. Thanks again.
All right. Talk to you later, Jason.
All right. Take care.
Okay, that will do it for episode 26. But before we go, I wanted to draw your attention to a new page on the AV Shop Talk website. So if you go over to avshoptalk.com, you'll see a little menu bar up there, and one of the options you can click on is called Brag Board. And the idea behind the Brag Board is to give systems integrators and AV professionals a place to show off their craftsmanship. So basically, we want to brag about you. So we're hoping to share lots of your photos here. And, if you've got a beautiful equipment rack that you just wired up with, really nice looking cable management, maybe a video wall that you commissioned, or something in the realm of pro AV that you are proud of, we want to see it. So you can submit it. It's pretty easy. All you have to do is email me, Nate, at avshoptalk.com with your name, installation date, Twitter handle, and or LinkedIn account, or link to those profile pages there, whatever social you want to share, and a link to the company website with some photos and a brief description. So, like I said, just email me. If you want to get featured up there on the brag board, we will brag about you. And of course, I had to kick it off to kind of set the tone and show people kind of what the idea was. So the very first post is up. It's called the Whiz Bang Boardroom. So back in 2010, I was part of a very high-end boardroom, and this is the epitome of a whiz-bang room with all kinds of stuff, but I won't spoil it. You have to go take a look at it. It's got a lot of motorized equipment going on in that room, so some very cool stuff, especially at the time back in 2010 they were doing with some multi-touch interfaces there on a big, large format display. So anyway, if that interests you, send your stuff over and we'll give your company a plug and we'll give you a plug. All right. Thank you for tuning in to episode 26. We will talk shop with you in the next episode of AV Shop Talk. The AV Shop Talk podcast is produced independently by me, Nate Schneider. Not to be confused with that other guy that does pro audio podcast, Nathan Lively. We'll be talking with him in a future episode very shortly, so stay tuned for that. Musical contributions have been provided by Colin Owens, and voiceover contributions have been provided by John Perry. If you'd like to get some more information about what you just heard, check out avshoptalk.com/episode 26.